That's what man Warren Buffett says. Sell when the competitive advantage changes. I got a letter from that white lawyer.
Saxe.
Yep. Knew I had beef with your pop, so he sent me some valuable information.
After what we recently saw on Go Season 3, one of the hot topics for Season 2 is what kind of crossover could we see between New York and Chicago? And there is no better time to discuss it after Kate went back to New York to take care of some business, whatever that was, but it is one of the theories we will be breaking down. But there is a lot of questions around Kate, 2-Bit, Tariq, Brayden, and a few others. So in today's video, we're going to be sticking to the evidence from what we've seen, what we know, and what the actors have been teasing on social media. I'm going to debunk some theories, but speak about those which I do think have a chance of occurring. Especially as many of you know, I did reach out to Joseph Sikora earlier in Season 2, which was kind of to help us to understand the timeline, and that gave us a pretty good understanding along with a few other clues around where they are between the both shows. So we're going to run through some crossover theories and connections. We're going to look at Julio, Filipe Lobos, Egan, 2-Bit, and something Michael Rainey Jr. teased on the Crew Has a Podcast, and last but not least, Cooper Saxe and everybody's fan favourite, Blanca Rodriguez. Now, just as a quick rundown, the crossovers that we have seen so far include Tommy coming back to New York in Season 1 of Ghost, where he was forced to fake his death. He also returned in Ghost Season 3, where he squashed the bad blood between him and Tasha. Elsewhere, we saw Blanca Rodriguez, Jenny Sullivan, and Agent Medina at the end of Season 1, but in New York, not Chicago. Now, I do think this was there to help establish the timeline at the end of Force's first season. Jenny Sullivan had just lost the Tariq St. Patrick case, and I also think this scene was here to drop breadcrumbs of a potential Blanca Rodriguez crossover in the future. Similarly to Saxe, Blanca Rodriguez was also after Tommy in Power, so this is something I will get to later on. But Force's Season 2 then picked up 2 days after the events of Season 1, and so they're a little behind compared to Ghost, and that's important when it comes to a potential crossover. The timeline rules out a lot of scenarios and a lot of characters, but with that being said, it brings me to the first one, Julio and Naci.
How you know my name? Chico. Julio's boy from Queens? That's what's up. Oh yeah.
One thing I'm sure none of us expected in Force was a nod and a connection to Julio. This was one of the first we heard in terms of crossovers or connections in Force Season 2. Naci knew Julio from Queens, and at the time I had questions around what else Naci knew about Tommy, his business, and what went down in New York. In a conversation between him and Miguel, they said he lost his girlfriend, his business partner, and everything there is to lose, but since then, we've not heard anything else in regards to Julio, so maybe it was just a cool little Easter egg and a nod to a Power fan favourite. So whether they touch on this again, who knows, but I wouldn't mind learning a bit more, because now that we think about it, did we really know about Julio and the vast connections he used to have back in Power?
Usted también hizo un buen trabajo con Felipe. Luego con Miguel y Mireia.
Is Filipe Lobos connected to the Garcias? Now, this is a question that I have been getting a lot in the comment section in my DMs on Instagram and on Twitter, and I thought I would touch base on it today with the central theme being crossovers and connections. Now in Power, we were introduced to Filipe Lobos 6 months into a business relationship with Ghost and Tommy. We learned that he was into men, but having said that, it doesn't mean gay men can't have kids. Classic example, JP in Force. Now fast forward to Force Season 2. Maria mentioned that her father's name was Felipe. Felipe was then mentioned again in a conversation between Abuela and Che, where Che said that she did a great job in raising Felipe, Maria, and Miguel. So with that being said, is there a connection to Filipe Lobos, and could he be Maria's father? Now for me, everybody knows that I always say not everybody has to be connected in the world of Power. And other than the names being very similar, which is a common Hispanic name, along with them being Mexican, there isn't any other clues to suggest that Filipe Lobos has ties to the Garcias, but let's just wait and see. I do think this is one connection that we do need to keep our eyes on, because if they continue to name drop Filipe over and over again, then there definitely might be something in this. Let's also not forget who orchestrated the death of Filipe Lobos. It was Tommy and Ghost. So if Lobos does have ties to the Garcias and is indeed Maria's father, then it is going to start to get very awkward between Tommy and Maria. So let's just keep our eyes and ears open on this one and whether they confirm anything in episodes 9 or 10. Now, why did Kate go back to New York? After Tommy and JP made it sound as if they killed D-Mac, she relapsed back into her old ways and she went missing for episodes 6 and 7. JP was worried about Kate, but this was normal for Tommy. He'd been there and seen it time and time again with Kate disappearing acts, so he said she'll turn up, and turn up she did. She was a complete wreck and back to her old ways, which I do think was a little unfair on her. She made huge strides forward in making a change and trying to do right by D-Mac, but that's not the point. Why did Kate go back to New York? I don't necessarily think this is when she met Tariq St. Patrick in Go Season 3, because we're not quite there yet in the timeline. But could it have been when Diana approached her and gave her the letter from Saxe? That's just something to think about when it comes to Kate being back in New York and appearing in Ghost, because at some stage, the timelines will have to merge. But let's see what conversation goes down between Tommy, Kay, and JP, because I'm sure there's a lot more that needs to be said.
We need the crossover, bro.
When I saw you guys in Chicago, I was talking to the Force writers, and they're like,
What's
I was
up? What's up?
Yeah.
Bro, there's no reason that we shouldn't be crossing paths.
yeah.
Now, this is the one I think everybody wants to see, but we'll probably have to be very patient for. Tariq, Brayden, Tommy, and even D-Mac and Marshall coming together, crossing paths either in New York or Chicago. And I do think this will happen eventually, but it's not going to happen anytime soon. Tommy's got his own problems in Chicago to deal with, and then there's Tariq and Brayden who have to deal with their issues with the Tejadas and Nomar. But I can see them coming together one day and having to team up, maybe to take down a common enemy, or when D-Mac and Marshall are a lot deeper in the game. Maybe Tommy sends them to New York to help Tariq and Brayden on a mission, who knows. There are so many ways they can spin this crossover, but there's also a lot that needs to happen in between. D-Mac needs to come back to Chicago and get deeper in the game, learn from Uncle Tommy, and the same goes for Marshall. But eventually, I do think there will be a huge crossover, and the actors are certainly down for it. But it just needs to make sense for the storyline and the trajectory for the overall story between both Force and Ghost. Raising Kanan is a little different because it is a standalone story, but between Ghost and Force, the possibilities really are endless, and this is one of them. Now, one character who a lot of Power fans want to see in Chicago is 2-Bit, but what does Tommy think about 2-Bit? Joseph Sikora did an Instagram live a while back, and he said Tommy still believes he's in the joint. And I know across IMDb across the last 2 years, they've shown 2-Bit as a character who was going to be in Force Season 1 and 2, but they also had him listed in Ghost Season 2. Now, this is one which has already been ruled out by the cast on social media, so I really do hate to be the bearer of bad news, but they've made it pretty clear that 2-Bit won't be turning up in Chicago, and so if there is a crossover of some sort, 2-Bit won't be it. I can't see Tommy and 2-Bit being on texting terms either, and it's not like he needs him at this moment in time. So do I see 2-Bit appearing in Force in Chicago in Season 2? Probably not. Last but not least, Cooper Saxe, Blanca Rodriguez, and the crossover that makes the most logical sense, which is law enforcement. They've already teased this crossover before when they had Blanca Rodriguez look into the mayhem in Chicago involving the Four Horsemen, and we were all wondering what would New York make of the news that Tommy Egan is alive in Chicago. Now, this is something that they answered in the first episode of Season 2. According to the New York offices, Tommy Egan is still dead, and they consider the matter closed, but here's where it gets slightly intriguing and a little complex. Many of you will remember I broke down a theory of how Cooper Saxe is still alive in the Force timeline, because it is before the events of Ghost Season 3. I also feel like there could be something in it with him being pictured with a cast of Force, and it also goes back to my original point that I made during Ghost Season 3, the shock factor of Cooper Saxe finding out that Tommy is alive. I thought this was a huge shame that we never got to see the shock factor in Ghost, but could we now see this in Force, especially because in the current timeline he is alive. Now just picture this, what if he had some rumblings about Tommy being alive from his old buddies? You can't tell me that this wouldn't have sparked some intrigue. This is Cooper Saxe we're talking about, so I genuinely wouldn't be surprised if he was up to more shady shit behind the scenes. These are characters you can't kill. I mean, they may be dead on the show, but you know what I mean. The impact that they leave will be felt for a very long time, and Saxe is that kind of guy to carry on annoying everyone despite him being dead. So could he have found out that Tommy was alive, and before he could act on the news, he was killed by Davis's brother? I'd certainly like to see it play out this way, only because I do feel like we didn't see that shock factor of Saxe finding out Tommy is alive. Now this also brings me on to Blanca Rodriguez. She's an ambitious character and very similar to Cooper Saxe. She was after the St. Patrick's and Egan back in power, and they actually worked together for a brief period until Saxe screwed her over. But she's also very ambitious, and if she were to get wind of Tommy Egan being alive or ever comes across these images, then who knows. You also have to wonder what Saxe left for Junior on this flash drive. Many believe that it is evidence to suggest that Junior is Ghost and Angela's son, and I'm not ruling that theory out. But knowing who Cooper Saxe is, I really wouldn't be surprised if there was a whole lot of information on this. Who knows what he was collecting and how long for, because he was someone who knew the consequences of the game. So there is a lot of dirt that could be on this flash drive. Now with all of that being said, those are a few theories in regards to crossovers and connections across the Power universe. I personally can't see any big crossovers in terms of Tariq, Brayden or 2-Bit, but this is something that I can see in the future, and maybe something that they do start to leave breadcrumbs for in Ghost Season 4. But drop all your thoughts down below in regards to all of these connections and crossovers, and as always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.